of the Environmental Resources Committee and the Metallic Mining Committee to order. We will begin with item number 2, Pledge Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Moving on to item number 3, we have public comment, 15-minute limit. I do understand that we have a number of individuals that signed up wishing to speak today. Those wishing to do so, I will call your name from the sign-up list that you filled out when you arrived at the meeting today. Seeing as we have a number of individuals today, I'm going to have the public comment time for each individual not exceed 2 minutes a person. So please bear that in mind when you address the committee. Also, I would encourage you all to try not to repeat statements if you can. Just please take that into consideration. With that being said, we'll get started here. The first person that I have listed is Bruce Grau. If you would come up and speak into the microphone here, please. Also a note, seeing as there's the 2-minute, I will provide a warning at 30 seconds.
Mr. Chair, just a note from Corporation Counsel, our rules do require that for public comment, commenters need to state their name and their municipality of residence.
Thank you. So let me correct that. Name and municipality of residence, please.
I'm Bruce Grau. I live at 1115 North 10th Street here in Wausau. So I'm going to try to do this in 2 minutes. So we expect you all here to do your due diligence and for the residents and natural resources of Marathon County by intensely researching this subject of gold mining in the Eau Claire River. It will affect all life downstream, downwind, and downhill. Find out, 1, can gold mining be done without any pollution, as CEO Colton asserted in the Wisconsin Right Now? If so, they would have met the requirement of the previous mining regulations. So why are they applying now? What's the difference between clean gold and dirty gold? Clean gold can only be produced from recycled gold, period. Based on my research, clean gold mining is an oxymoron like clean coal. Did you know that just 41 cell phones hold the same amount as gold as a ton of ore? And let's look at Greenlight Metal, a company you stock that's dropped 20% in a year. Is it a reliable business investment to allow dirty extraction of 7,500 pounds of gold, most likely of low quality, according to estimates by the U.S. Geological Society? This requires more extensive extraction methods, and consider the erosive and toxic effects of this process. While now 40% of U.S. watershed headwaters have already been contaminated by mining, there is no
30 seconds.
Ecological El Dorado. Jobs, realistic estimate of jobs, wages, duration of employment. How long will workers be able to work if the gold runs out of mine or gold is no longer profitable? Who will be responsible for the cleanup? What are the implications about violating environmental justice rights in a region that's up to 35% poor and essential to Native people? While researching, look for who's funding the study. Seek out the concerns of living people.
Thank you. Moving on to the next speaker, please.
Thank you for cutting my time short.
Next up, we have Dan Barth.
Thank you. My name is Dan Barth. I live in the town of Knowlton, Marathon County. We're fortunate in Marathon County to have something more precious than gold, and that's our clean water. I've been listening to this esteemed committee, which I highly respect, for quite a while, and I've been thrilled to hear your conversations about clean water and taking care of the clean water. In fact, looking at your agenda, I find that it lays on you the responsibility in accordance with County Strategic Plan Objective 6.3 to protect and enhance the quality and quantity and quality of potable groundwater and potable surface water supplies. I applaud you for taking this duty seriously. A little bit of research reveals the fact that sulfide mining always and by its very nature pollutes and toxifies the water in the area downstream. No ifs, ands, or buts. These are the facts, regardless of the promises made by mining companies. These were the reasons for Act 171, the Prove It First law. The law that was completely bipartisan and signed by a Republican governor, Tommy Thompson, in 1998. In Act 134, passed on a completely partisan vote and signed into law by Scott Walker in 2017 in a rush to make Wisconsin open for business, repealed the Prove It First law. I know that law also took away your power to stop it
30
in your
seconds.
own county. Nevertheless, I call on you to politely and firmly oppose this mine and test drilling. Indeed, if you care about our waters much as I believe you do, and if you intend to act in accordance with your responsibility to protect it, you must express your opposition. Thank you.
Thank you. To our next speaker, we have Kathy Conti.
Kathy Conley Barth, 206540 Rabic Lane, Mosinee. I'm coming to speak about the mine and our wonderful waters that so many people love to fish in, so many people love to swim in. We draw kayak racers from all over the country. We have to protect the waters. These mines haven't been proven. It's been proven that none of the people, none of the operations have been able to prove that they could operate for 10 years without contaminating the waters, surrounding waters. Why would we do this to the neighbors in that area? It would devastate the environment. We don't even know whether there's PFAS in the drilling fluid, and that's parts per trillion that they've required. That's a big issue now. All kinds of cancers are caused by it. Why would we want to pollute our waters?
Thank you. Next up, I have Kelly King. Kelly, you're signed up for rezone. Okay, so you'll address the group during the public hearing.
Later.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I also have a James Botsford from the town of Wausau.
I'd like to say good afternoon to everyone here and thank the committees for.
Can I stop you one second,
My name
James?
is.
Oh, a couple
Sorry.
things. One, you wish to address the group of metallic mining.
I
right?
do.
Okay. I have to ask because of what's listed here. That's fine. Name of municipality.
My name is James Botsford, and I live in the town of Wausau.
Okay. Go ahead. Thank you.
And I do want to thank the committee for its time today, both committees, for hopefully looking at this very seriously. I'd like to pose a rhetorical question to start. Has there ever been a community that is proud of the gaping hole and the toxic slag heaps that ooze unstoppable poisons after the distant owners are gone? After the corporation has been sold 3 times and no one can be accountable. Here we have a foreign corporation that has been in existence maybe 2 years. They are hoping the people of Marathon County are naive and short-sighted. In the coming years, people from cities are going to be increasingly drawn to an area such as this because of the cleanliness and the quality of life, And it's only going to be true if we continue to demonstrate a commitment to that quality of life and the clean water and lands that we have. You can't unring the bell. This is the moment in time to not turn a blind eye to common sense and the legacy of our lovely area.
30 seconds.
There is no likely moment to just say no once they've started to dig the hole. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have listed Ron James.
Ron James, Town of Evergreen. Imagine digging a 450-foot deep hole in the middle of a lake and somehow trying to hold back the water. Because the groundwater is at the surface in Marathon County, that's exactly what this proposal is. The first phase does likely involve PFAS-containing drilling fluids. These chemicals will be injected into groundwater that people use for drinking water. When drilling in acid rock, state code requires the use of a casing. This casing needs to be driven down through the glacial overburden into the bedrock with no cutting edge or no lubrication. This isolates the drilling fluids. The next thing is the drill bit is inserted. Through ports in the bottom, that's where those PFAS-containing chemicals are flying out, all the way down to 450 feet. This material, hazardous waste, cannot overflow the top of this and just spill on the ground. We need to find out how this can be driven into the ground, how the containment is, and those hazardous wastes need to be taken to a special landfill. When the drilling is done, concrete is needed to seal up each hole. That's administered through a small diameter tube. In the case of a 350-foot deep hole, that'd be 7 tons of concrete per hole. That's administered through a small conductor pipe. Then somehow, this whole mechanism is designed to be, or is supposed to be by state code, lifted up at the same time, leaving a core of concrete that's supposed to harden underwater. We need to hear the explanations about this and how this state code can be
30 seconds.
how it be applied to. If you hear anything that doesn't describe these strict requirements in state code, put up a red flag, and pollution is imminent if that doesn't happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the sign-in sheet, I have Wayne Kleinschmidt.
Wayne Kleinschmidt, Wausau. I spoke here back in 2080 opposing this. I have a degree in geology and degrees in chemistry and physics. I worked for the Wisconsin Geological Survey for 3 summers. I worked for what used to be Zimpro Corporation doing water research for 3 summers on ammonium ion removal. I would like to tell you that Aquila's resources, they have now sold to all of their resources to Gold Resource Corporation. Gold Resource Corporation's on the New York Stock Exchange at GORO, G-O-R-O. And they paid $30 million to Aquila for this. 85% of Aquila's, and I have information on every bit of this. I have every one of their drill cores and what the drill core depth was and what they found. 85% of Aquila's resources are owned by a subsidiary of Bold Steel Resources, the commodities mining and trading arm of BAOWU Group, which is a Chinese state-owned enterprise. And they are one of the largest steel production companies in the entire world. And this is
30
ultimately
seconds.
probably who will own this. I am very, very concerned also, as I indicated, I have the chemical makeup of every one of the minerals that they struck and the depths to which they drilled. If you want to see that information, I have it all here. because I got it from Aquila. And I am so concerned because, like they said, the sulfur is going to be oxidized, the sulfuric acid. The
2
sulfuric
minutes is
acid is
up.
going
Thank
to
you.
drain into the Eau Claire River and ultimately into Lake Wassa. You want Wassa to be one of the most polluted places in Wisconsin? I don't think so.
Sir, thank you. Next on the sign-in sheet, I have Nancy Stencil.
You guys have seen enough of me. I shouldn't even have to introduce myself anymore, right? I'm Nancy Stencil, town of Red Mountain. And I'm going to tell you what I tell you every time I walk in here. Water is life. And after the repeal of the Prove It First law in 2017, you know, the one where the mining companies wrote their own laws, now we see them walk in here and they try to greenwash the citizens of this county. And they want to talk to you about how these metals are needed in the new green economy. Well, let me tell you, there's plenty of gold out there. There's gold in the vaults, in jewelry boxes, and better yet, we can recycle our electronics. And we don't need any more gold. So there's no reason to drill, Mr. Colton. So copper can also be recycled easily and more cost effectively. So meanwhile, you need 3 tons of rock crushed to make 1 paper clip worth of gold. Greenwashing is a false narrative that the mining company uses to exploit people. It increases their bottom line. So prove it first. Prove it first that you can do this without destroying our environment. Because I'll tell you, you can't. Not when groundwater is at 0 to 20 feet. That's why you rewrote Prove It First. And I'm not going to sit back and watch you rape and pillage our land,
30 seconds.
destroy our resources. And I'm going to tell you that I'm here to, that we have a grassroots movement here. You have no social license to operate here. Make that very clear.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the next speaker. I do want to remind the audience of a couple of things. First of all, can everybody hear the microphone in the back, the speakers, when an individual is speaking up here? Yes? Okay, thank you. Secondly, when you are addressing, or when you are speaking under public comment, you're supposed to address the committee, not any specific person in the public. You're supposed to direct your comments to us. Thank you. Moving on, I have Kathy Conti Barth. Kathy, did you speak already? Okay. Okay.
Jacob, I think we had some call-ins that we wrote into, so I think it did get written down twice is what happened, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure everybody who signed up gets a chance to speak. Okay. Thank you. Next on the sign-in sheet, I have Dan Barth.
And that's.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Okay. Moving on here. Here's a new name, Eric Rempala.
My name's Eric Rempala. I live in Irma. I own property in Oneida County, and I do a lot of money spending in Marathon County. I attended the meeting in 2018 with Mr. Kleinschmidt, at which point we opposed mining, and we understand the committee's hands is tied with some of our state laws. But I want to let you know, I've done volunteer work with the Protect the Willow in Oneida County. I'm a member of an Oneida County Clean Waters Action, and we've been working against this type of mining since 2018. We've contested 2 mines already, or potential mines, and I want to let the board know what to expect just in the drilling process alone. You need to ask the DNR what they're going to monitor, how they're going to monitor it, what your responsibility as a county is going to be to do that job. Do not say, well, the DNR's got this. The DNR is understaffed. You will be amazed by the lack of oversight when this drilling occurs. This drilling must be observed from hole number 1 to hole number 100. I'm not even talking about the metallic mining, digging the hole and the sulfuric acid and the acid mine drainage. This is big stuff.
30 seconds.
Your job is to protect your constituency. It's not to promote any other thing. Green Metal's ability to make money is not your responsibility. It's their job to do, if they're gonna mine and drill, is to do it cleanly. It's your job to make sure it's done right. Do not underestimate what's on your table. This is not a small job. I've been doing it for 5 years, and it takes a long time to understand it.
2 minutes has expired.
Don't be bilked.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next person, I have Lynn Sutherland.
Lynn Sutherland, 1021 Broadway, Wausau, Wisconsin. I have listened with great interest to all this fascinating information, and I'm here to ask all of you, what is important here? Are we going to stand in the way of economy and capitalism? Shouldn't our children's lives be sacrificed? I mean, aren't we willing to do this? Aren't we willing to sacrifice our clean water? I mean, what really is important here? Capitalism and the economy and the profits of a mining company, or our children and our grandchildren? So I am listening to everyone who has spoken here. I trust the board. I've been very impressed with them in past hearings, and I just wanted to add my piece, not as an expert, but as a mother, as a neighbor, as a grandmother. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for some clarification on this next one because I apologize, I can't read the handwriting. Bill Morris, did you wish to speak or no? No? Okay, thank you. And then we have a call-in user, I believe, Guy Reeder.
He was just unmuted.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, pues so, on equipment cam, while passing this totem,
Guy, can I stop you for just 1 second?
My name is Guy Ritter. I'm from the Menominee.
Can you just state your name and your home municipality, please?
Yeah, I was.
Oh, you were?
You got to realize that this is the original language spoken here, and I was just introducing myself, but I will do it in your language, in English. My name is Guy Ryder. I live here in Menominee County. I'm like a 34th generation Wisconsinite. We've been here for time immemorial.
Thank you.
I wanted to just be in this meeting to talk a little bit about, it seems to me when these mining companies come, they talk about indigenous people, they talk about all the things that they've done with us. We have a long track record with Aquila, with Greenlight Metals. We know the way they operate. I'm hoping that the Marathon County Board will understand, or the Environmental Metallic Mining Committee should have us to the table. I don't know why they're giving a presentation and we're not there giving a presentation on the resources and on the cultural resources that we have there. The very name Wausau is a Menominee name. It comes from our language. They will tell you how important this is and how great they're going to do it, but it's the same song and dance time and time again. Every time that these mining companies come into the community, it's the same strategy they used over and over again. But when you look at everything that they've done, their track record, in any community they've ever gone to, the community always suffers. This isn't any different than what's going to happen here if you guys allow things like this to happen. I would hope that you do your due diligence and reach out to some local tribes, Menominee being one of them, because we're the longest living inhabitants of Wisconsin, and we're one of your closest neighbors. We have inhabited all those rivers and those lakes for many, many, many years.
30 seconds.
And it would be great to have you guys reach out to us and have us in there to have a discussion about it. Thank you.
Thank you, and I apologize for that confusion at the beginning. All right. I believe that is everybody on the sign-in sheet for public comment. I'd like to thank all those members of the public who addressed the committees this afternoon. Moving on to item number 4, we have educational presentations, outcome monitoring reports, and committee discussion. 4A, department updates, conservation planning and zoning, parks, rec and forestry, and solid waste department. 4A1, we have overview of the Marathon County metallic mining exploration permit process.
Hi, first I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Shad Harvey. I'm the Land Resource Manager for Marathon County. And today we're just going to talk a little bit about the metallic mining exploration permit process that we use here at Marathon County. So Marathon County Chapter 17 zoning code covers 4 areas of metallic mining: exploration, bulk sampling, prospecting, and metallic mining. Today we're going to focus on the exploration. The matrix here kind of shows very basic general steps on the process in which we issue or deny a permit. First being the application comes to the zoning administrator. Standards for the exploration are reviewed, making sure that the materials abide by the various standards, and then a decision is made whether it's issued or denied. And we'll go a little bit more in depth on this as we go through this presentation. So what is non-metallic mining? Or what is metallic mining exploration? To get a better understanding of what exactly metallic mine exploration is, Wisconsin Administrative Code NR 130 defines it as the on-site geologic examination from the surface of the area by core, rotary, percussion, or other drilling, where the diameter of the hole does not exceed 18 inches, for the purpose of searching for non-ferrous metallic minerals or establishing the nature of known non-ferrous metallic mineral deposits, and includes associated activities such as clearing and preparing drilling sites and constructing access roads. Chapter 17.204.05 metallic mining exploration was designed in accordance with state law, including Wisconsin Statutes 293 and Wisconsin Administrative Code NR 130. It was intentionally designed not to duplicate or supersede the regulatory authority of the Wisconsin DNR or other state and federal agencies. Rather, it was designed to work along with them. Chapter 17 also lays out our process in gathering required materials to essentially have a complete application. So the application process, we'll kind of go through the steps here and how it starts out. Like I mentioned before, an application is received by the county by an applicant with the required materials and a $500 fee. Some of the materials that we ask for, or the material list that we ask for, are the names, addresses, phone numbers of all property owners and applicants. This is so we know the stakeholders, we know the people involved in the exploration. We also ask for parcel identification numbers, the lot identifying the lots, including the legal land descriptions and the zoning district. Again, this is so we can verify we know exactly where the exploration would be occurring. as well as making sure that it complies with our zoning districts, making sure it's in a district that exploration is permitted use. Additionally, we also ask for all copies of documents regarding the proposed exploration that have been submitted to state and federal agencies. Some examples of this, the Wisconsin DNR gets a notice of intent to drill. We asked for all the materials that was provided to them for that. We also asked for the application and materials for the Wisconsin exploration licenses through the DNR. So it's various things like that we also ask to have provided to us so we can all kind of stay on the same page. The site plans that are included in this need to include a 2-scale location of all nearby public and private streets, affected and adjacent parcel boundaries, lot dimensions, location of all existing temporary and proposed structures, location of existing or proposed on-site wastewater treatment systems, location of all pipelines, railroads, streams, utilities, wetlands on the proposed site and adjacent parcels. General liability insurance, we also require proof of. Moving on to the next step in our permitting process, when the county receives an application, the town in which the proposed exploration site is located is notified, along with the Metallic Mining Committee Chair, the Environmental Resource Committee Chair, and the Wisconsin DNR. This notification helps us all stay on the same page. It helps us keep the town, the county, and the state informed on the proposed exploration project. After the notifications, the application goes into an initial review where we look at the applications, just ensuring all of our required information and paperwork is obtained. If we find that all the information that we require is there, the application is deemed complete and it moves to our compliance review process. Should there be items missing from the application, like a site plan or something like that missing, this goes into a pending state. We notify the applicant in writing, and it remains in a pending state until all required information is obtained. So step 5 is the compliance review period. If an applicant is moved to the compliance review stage, the proposed exploration project and materials are reviewed to ensure it abides by the standards of Chapter 17 and Chapter 22, which is our Shoreline, Wetland, and Floodplain Code. Marathon County has 20 business days once the application is deemed complete to complete that review. If the proposed project is found to meet all the applicable regulations, the zoning administrator issues a placard, notifies the applicant, and then issues the exploration permit. Now, if the proposed project is found not to comply with our regulations, we notify the applicant of the reasons why their permit is being denied, and why it didn't comply with the ordinance and the regulations. So just some key takeaways from the presentation here. The metallic mining exploration section of Chapter 17 was designed to keep regulatory agencies such as Marathon County and the Wisconsin DNR informed and on the same page. As well as if an applicant supplies the required information and it is completed in a manner that meets Marathon County's Chapter 17.204.542 ordinance, the county is then required to issue the proposed exploration permit. The county does work with the Wisconsin DNR to make sure the proposed exploration project follows the applicable requirements. We do actually have Roberta Walls and Molly Gardner from the DNR virtually with us today. Then they can explain their role in the exploration permitting process. I just may have to unmute him here for a sec.
So Shad, I take it this is our cue to introduce ourselves.
Yes, thank you.
Sure, I'll go first. My name is Roberta Walls. I am the non-metallic mining coordinator with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. I have been working to fulfill a vacancy until we were able to bring Molly Gardner on. And so I have done some preliminary work and some exploration license issuances to both Aquila and to Greenlight Metals up until this point. As Molly gets up to speed on the projects and department purviews, we will be in transition. So I will offer what I know up to date on any projects that you might have questions for us on. And Molly will then be able to supplement and begin to transition her role as the metallic mining coordinator. Molly?
Thanks, Roberta. Yeah, as Roberta had just stated, I am the new metallic mining coordinator, and I just started in this role. So moving forward, I will be the point of contact with the DNR.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Shad from the committee? Couple things to clarify. Shad, this is a permitting process that is a permit issued by our staff. So the committee would not have any sort of responsibility to approve this permit, nor would the county board, correct?
So currently right now, the county, it's purely educational right now for the boards.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, committees? If not, thank you, Shad, and thank you, Molly and Roberta. Moving on to item 4A2, we have informational presentation from Greenlight Metals. While they're getting set up, one thing to note, please, if you do have electronic devices, please silence them. I've been hearing a couple go off here and there. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Joint Committee. My name is Dan Colton. I'm CEO, President of Greenlight Metals. And sitting with me, and he'll be up here in a moment, is my colleague Steve Donahue. He is a he's a board member at Greenlight. We both would like to thank the committee for this opportunity to introduce ourselves, the company, what our mission is, what the Reef Project is about, as well as our commitment to sustainable mining and securing that all-important social license to operate. Now, one might ask, why are we here this early in our ownership of the Reef Project? What we are proposing to do this year, in winter of 2022 and 2023, is a very limited exploration program. And when you compare that exploration program to the extensive exploration that's already taking place out on the project site, both in the mid-1980s and early 1990s by Noranda, in 211, 212 by Aquila, where if you were to go out the site today, you would have no idea where they had drilled. You wouldn't be able to find the drill pads. You will find no contamination of groundwater. All right? The only reason you could find where they had drilled in the past is if you had maps of where the borings had been installed, to no effect on the environment, short or long term. So what we're planning to do is something maybe 1/5 of the work that's been done historically out there, But we're here today because we believe in engaging with the community, even a community, a component of which is very hostile to mining. We are more than comfortable at engaging with anybody who's got concerns about mining. And we certainly are receptive to an opportunity to engage with the thought leaders of a community, local politicians, board members like yourselves, to keep you abreast of what we as a company are, what we plan to do on the site, and as well, engage the community in discussions over concerns they have about alleged potential impacts mining has on the environment. Now, again, that's why we're here, and it is the first step in securing that social license to operate. Greenlight Metals is a Wisconsin-centric company, meaning what? A number of the board members, a number of our executive team actually live in Wisconsin. Steve Donahue, you'll hear from him later this afternoon, lives in Green Bay. Our exploration geologist, John Gardner, lives in Wausau. A number of our board members and other executives, while not having lived in Wisconsin, have done lots of work in Wisconsin and spent much of their careers working in Wisconsin. Now, while I haven't worked in Wisconsin, I grew up in Minneapolis. I raised my family in Minneapolis. I have a master's degree in geochemistry, thermodynamics, mineral fluid gas equilibria. I've got an undergraduate degree in geology. And then I went on to law school, and I've represented mining companies and railroad companies doing environmental law and mining law for the last 30 years. I appreciate, our company appreciates and respects Wisconsin politics, regional politics. We don't believe that a company, whether it's a mining company or any industrial company, can survive today effectively without being part of a community and accepted by that community. And that entails engendering the trust and the confidence and the respect of the community, which is that social license to operate, which again is why we're here. So with that, as a general introduction, I'll move into the slides. Today, our agenda is basically a real quick overview of the company, what our mission is. We'll discuss a bit President Biden's March of 2021 memorandum and order to the Secretary of Defense. We'll talk about sustainable mining. We'll do a brief review of the Reef Project. It's a gold-copper project. We'll talk about the work that we plan to do this winter, and then we'll talk about what might follow that. And then we'll talk about 21st century mining. That is, we will show and be able to discuss with you what 50 years of environmental law means as it is enforced in this country and as it relates to the successes that you can actually see in mining projects around the country and their protection of the environment. Oh, speak up. Is that better? Huh. Sort of have to lean forward here. Were you leaning forward like that, Chad? Now let's see here. Okay. So now to our company. This is our corporate structure, and you'll see on the right there are 3 companies that sit under the Greenlight umbrella. The 2 bottom companies you'll see are Wisconsin companies, created as companies in Wisconsin, doing business in Wisconsin. And then above them are the one Canadian company called Greenlight Metals that is in Toronto. Greenlight Metals is not yet listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, but we would like it to be listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange for the purpose of tapping into capital markets and funding to move a lot of our projects forward. However, the boots on the ground, the in-field work will be done under the company, the very lower company, which is Greenlight Wisconsin LLC. So our application to Marathon County, for example, for the exploration permit was an application filed by Greenlight Wisconsin. Our BLM, our federal permits are all applied for under our Greenlight Wisconsin company. I'm CEO, president of all 3 companies. Our mission is to primarily be an exploration company. We are an exploration company right now. So what we plan to do is lead the exploration and the preliminary development of the discovery of mineral resources on the Pinocchion Volcanic Belt. The Pinocchion Volcanic Belt is a series of volcanic rock over 1.8 billion years old in Wisconsin, which is known to be prolific in various mineral deposits of copper, zinc, and some gold. You'll see on this slide the Pinocchion Volcanic Belt in green, the PVB, takes up a good percentage of northern Wisconsin. Now, these metals, the copper and the zinc, have, over the last number of years, come to be referred to as, along with lithium and nickel, what they call them are clean energy metals. And they call them clean energy metals because these metals are used extensively in voluminous amounts in the manufacturing of clean energy technologies. And what do I mean by clean energy technologies? We're talking about electric cars, we're talking about batteries, we're talking about offshore wind turbines, onshore wind turbines, and solar power. This is an interesting slide. It shows a comparative analysis, if you will, between the clean energy technologies I just mentioned, electric, car, offshore and onshore wind, solar, against the other types of energy power sources, for example, nuclear, coal, and gas. In the upper half of this slide, you'll see it compares the electric car to the conventional car. And you'll see that an electric car, to manufacture an electric car, you're talking about at least, at a minimum, 2 times the amount of copper that a conventional car uses. Some of your nicer electrical cars, it can get to 3 to 4 times the amount of copper. You'll see that offshore and onshore wind turbines use up and require a lot of copper. So does solar power compared to nickel, coal, and natural gas. With respect to nickel, you'll see there is a lot of nickel used in electric cars, batteries. Very little nickel used in conventional cars. Nickel used in nuclear, but significant amounts of nickel used in your electric cars. And then with respect to zinc, you'll see very large amounts of zinc are required for the wind turbines that you drive by, both onshore and offshore. And what's significant here is that the Pinocchion Volcanic Belt here in Wisconsin has prodigious amounts of copper and zinc. Nickel is still yet to be discovered. It wouldn't be surprising to find zinc. Now, many people don't consider gold to be a clean energy metal, but some people do. Gold is found in all the electronics that run these machines. Electric, conventional cars, offshore wind, onshore wind, solar, nuclear, coal, and natural gas. So gold is required. Now, the amount of clean energy metals that people are projecting we are going to need in order to transition into a low carbon, clean, green energy economy amounts to about 3 to 4 times the amount of metal that we are currently mining today for the respective metals. I just read an interesting statistic. It was presented in Minnesota at a public hearing where, to put it in some perspective, the demand on copper in order to sustain this transition into a green economy, over the next 20 years, this world will need to be mining more copper than has been mined to date in the world. So that's the next 20 years. We're going to be producing more copper than we have mined in the history of mankind. That's a lot of copper. So that brings me to a recent executive memo order out of President Biden of all the administrations, a very liberal, very environmentally conscious administration. President Biden issued a memo on March 30 or 31 of this year, and that memo basically declared that this country needs to accelerate, its exploration and production of these clean energy metals, really focusing on lithium, but it also can be applied to the other metals, and that unless we accelerate the exploration and production of these minerals in this country, we threaten national security, national defense, critical infrastructure, and as well, this transition to a green economy. And the memo authorizes, or I should say charges, the Secretary of Defense to take that charge. That is, not just cheerlead for more metal production in this country, but actually get involved in actively exploring and making sure that we start producing more metals in this country. Now, the two primary reasons underlying President Biden's memo, and the first reason is what I just referred to and what this slide shows. There's going to be a high demand, an increasing demand for these metals due to these technologies, the clean technologies, among other things. But the other reason is many of these metals that we're going to be relying on, and we rely on today, are imported. This slide shows that 40% or 35% or 37% of copper we use in this country, we import. Shows that 50% of the nickel that we use in this country, we import. 83% of the zinc we use in this country, we import. 100% of rare earths we import. And a vast majority of these metals that we're importing, from foreign jurisdictions overseas, are from jurisdictions that are either antagonistic or hostile to this country, or a bit unstable, like the Democratic Congo. And we have seen, and what we're seeing today and living through as a result of this pandemic, is countries are not at all hesitant to, in looking out for their best interests, stop the export of resources to other companies. And so if you read President Biden's memo, he will say, this really puts us behind the 8 ball. I think they actually use that phrase. This puts us behind the 8 ball. This country, unless it starts producing these metals, okay, is going to hit a wall. It's going to hit a wall, both with respect to national security, defense, critical infrastructure, and clean energy. So the other aspect that the memo addresses is, look, we need these metals. We need to start producing them in the country, but it's got to be done sustainably. And sustainability has a number of different components. My colleague Steve will speak to sustainability specifically. But sustainability means mine this stuff while protecting the environment. And while mining this stuff and protecting the environment, making sure that local communities benefit. And not just over the life of the mine, as we've heard some people claim, but long-term. Communities can be found and can benefit from mining that takes place in their community or across the state, across the Pinocchion. And Steve will speak to these issues. Now, with respect to the Reef Project, the Reef Project is an interesting deposit. It's a gold-copper deposit. It is what they refer to as a thrust fault hosted gold deposit, meaning the gold is associated with fractures and faulting, and faults and fractures that emanate from very deep in the earth. And it is a high grade. It's generally, on average, found to be about 9 grams per ton, which is really quite rich. I'll direct your attention to the picture in the upper right-hand corner of the slide, a picture of what appears to be a gold-encrusted boulder. And that it precisely is what that is. It's a gold-encrusted boulder. It returned over 400 grams per ton. That's close to 11 ounces per ton of gold. And that is just bonanza grade. You just don't see 11 ounces per ton of gold or anywhere in the world, really. A number of mines, but it is very rich. Now, we think, and our understanding is, our exploration geologist, John Gardner, who lives in Wausau here, believes this boulder is associated with the fractures that were at one point the pathways along which these gold-enriched fluids migrated from very deep in the earth to their present location. And our exploration program this winter of 2022-2023 is designed to basically evaluate the geology and the structure out there to see if we can't find these structures, these pathways, okay, and drill parallel to them. All right, so we're as focused on what is the geology out there as we are, is there more gold? We clearly want to find more gold, all right, but what really is the prime focus is developing an understanding of what the structure is out there, because it's the structure that brought the gold to this location. Now, where are we at in our program? Our drill program will be a 2 6-week phased program. So we'll run a rotosonic drill for about 6 weeks, and the results of that rotosonic drilling will dictate where a 6-week diamond core drilling program will take place. And we anticipate that those 2 phases, the 2 6 weeks, will run consecutive, or they may even overlap if the data we get back is helpful and allows us to quickly identify locations. Or you might find this 2 6 weeks takes more than 12 weeks. Maybe it takes 3 months. We don't know, but the drilling will take place in the winter. And we are right now in the process of developing the types of information one would need to support your various applications or permits to explore. One permit being our application for a permit to explore from Marathon County. We submitted a draft application to your zoning board, SHAD, to be specific. And there was an understanding in advance of us submitting that application that we would submit a incomplete application. We knew we didn't have all the information that the application was requesting. Things like wetland delineation, things like endangered species analysis. But we submitted it anyway for purposes of facilitating discussion and getting discussion going between SHAD, the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, the Army Corps of Engineers, and our company. We have just obtained or renewed our Wisconsin DNR exploration license. What we have really left to do is to fill out and complete the exploration permit with Marathon County, and also prepare and submit a notice of intent to drill with the Department of Natural Resources, which really is the primary application and permit for drilling. That notice of intent will include a work plan, a detailed work plan showing where the initial drilling will occur, and then it will also discuss that, additional drill sites will need to be identified, and so that work plan will be amended as we move our drilling program forward. But that drill plan will also include wetland delineation field work, and as well as endangered species studies. The wetland delineation field work has been completed. We will be submitting a report within the next week to the Department of Natural Resources and the Corps of Engineers. We've already submitted the endangered species report to the Department of Natural Resources. So what we'll have left to do is to confirm the delineation report, wetland delineation report with the Department of Natural Resources, and then also finalize our detailed work plan. We don't anticipate submitting our notice of intent to drill for another couple months yet, because we don't plan to start drilling until conditions freeze up out on the site. At that point, we will provide notice, and as well, of course, the various landowners that we have lease agreements with. At the end of the process, we will end up with about 1,000 meters of core that we will evaluate for purposes of that structure I was talking about, as well as we will assay it. That is, we will send it in for chemical analysis to see what gold results come back. Which brings me to one question that's asked a lot, and that is, when are we going to see a mine out there? And the answer to that right now is, you may never see a mine out there. Right now, we don't believe right now it's economic to put a mine out there. And again, more analysis needs to be done. I will condition that statement with more analysis needs to be done, but that's why we're out drilling. We need to find more, we feel we need to find more resource. So If we're out drilling and we get done drilling in 2022, 2023, and the data comes back and it's bad, it doesn't, well, from our perspective, it shows no gold, or we're not able to get our hands around what the structure is, there's a very good chance you won't see any more drilling. There's a very good chance you might see us walk away from this project. On the other hand, if we drill and the data comes back and looks great, we got a feeling for structure, we actually find some gold and expand the resource, I would say that you can expect probably 3 to 4 more years of drilling, just drilling, in order to do 3 things. Expand that resource even more, drill within the resource to get a better statistical feel on what the grade of that resource is as a function of where you are in that 3-dimensional space under our feet. And then the other types of drilling you'll see is installation of groundwater monitoring wells. And the installation of groundwater monitoring wells is not much different than the installation of exploration boring. So any people who've put and installed their own groundwater drinking well know pretty much everything that goes on with respect to exploration drilling and the risk it poses to the environment, which is little if any. So we will be doing, over that 3 to 4 years, a lot of drilling to get a baseline for environment from which you do and start to evaluate maybe a mine design that minimizes impacts to the environment and meets all the federal and state and local statutes and regulations, because mining, as I'm sure folks know, is one of the most heavily regulated industries in the country. And the United States regulatory system is probably as complex a regulatory environmentally protective system as any regulatory system around the world. In fact, many people pattern their environmental regulations after the United States. So I would anticipate that, let's say the drilling results come back and they're just good for 3 years. I would expect that this community might expect to see an application for a mine 6 years, 7 years down the road at the earliest. But again, all you need is a couple rounds of bad drilling results and you won't have a mine. So we just don't know. At that point, at this point, I'm going to turn the mic over to Steve.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. My name is Steve Donahue. As Dan mentioned, I'm on the board of directors for Greenlight Metals. I'd like to give you a little bit of background on myself so you know who's talking to you today. I live in De Pere, Wisconsin. I've lived in De Pere since 1990 when I came out of graduate school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'm a licensed professional hydrologist here in the state. I served on the state licensing board for about 10 years as chair of the hydrology section, and then also chair of the joint examining board of licensed geologists, hydrologists, and soil scientists. I also work at Foth Infrastructure and Environment. It's an engineering consulting company headquartered here in Wisconsin. So I spent my whole professional career doing work in the mining industry, much of it here in Wisconsin, up in Michigan, over in Minnesota, the western part of the U.S., Canada, done a little bit of work in Central Asia and Mongolia, and also done some work down in Peru. But all of my work has always been focused on environmental studies as it relates to developing our natural resources, notably our metallic resources that are so vital to our economy. What I want to talk to you about today is a couple aspects of the company, notably our commitment to sustainable development. That's what we have to focus on as an exploration company, and any project that would have to be developed ultimately has to focus on sustainable development. How do we protect the environment? Because we need to do two things as we do this. we need the metals for our economy, for our way of life, and we also need to protect the environment, and that's what this company is committed to doing. We cannot address the challenges that we have in society as it relates to energy development, green energy, whether it's solar, wind, or whatever, the conversion from combustion engine powered vehicles to electric vehicles. We can't do any of that stuff unless we also responsibly develop our metal resources. So fundamentally, what we have to address is where are we going to get those resources from? Right now, this country is heavily dependent on securing those metal resources from foreign sources, sources that are controlled by China or Russia or other countries that we are starting to have some international problems with. So that's a real risk to our economy. It's a real risk to our national security. All of us, regardless of whether we're Republicans or Democrat, we all share that. And so we really have to start this conversation by having a dialogue with local communities on this issue, because it's very important and it's something that we as a company are committed to. We've heard a lot today on the importance of these metals for the green economy, but there's other manufacturing industries that also are heavily dependent on these types of metals. Notably, one that I think we've all been paying attention to over the last 3 years is the pharmaceutical industry. If we think about just the manufacturing process of that vaccine that pretty much probably everybody in this room has taken, that vaccine cannot be manufactured without metal products. Copper, nickel for stainless steel, medical devices that we use in hospitals for surgery, it's all stainless steel. That's coming from nickel. If we were taking zinc tablets during the pandemic, a lot of people were taking vitamin D and zinc. And that zinc that you take in that zinc tablet or in that vitamin supplement, that's got everything in it from A to zinc. The zinc didn't come from a plant. The zinc comes from a mine. I always laughed when I went to the store and bought some zinc tablets, because on the front of the bottle they showed these little sheafs of grain. It looked like wheat. The zinc doesn't come from a plant, it comes from a mine. So our obligation as a company, our obligation as engineers and scientists that work on these projects, our obligation as government officials, as interested members of the public, is to have a conversation about how we develop this stuff responsibly for the benefits that we're all relying on. So that's really what we're going to focus on as a primary objective of this company is outreach to communities, conversations with important committees like we're having here today, and conversations with interested members of the public. Regardless of whether you're pro-mining or anti-mining, we want to have a conversation with you. We only ask one thing, and that is we're all living in contentious times here. We see it in our politics. Let's just make a commitment to having a respectful conversation regardless of what side of the issue you're on here. Some other things that we want to be talking to the community about as we go forward is what are some of the enduring benefits that can occur as a result of the development of these types of resources. What are those benefits that we're talking about? It's things like jobs, obviously, training opportunity for young people that are coming into the workforce, whether it's the labor, the engineering, or the science that goes into these projects. There's a tremendous amount of engineering disciplines that are focused on the development of these projects, from civil engineers, mechanical engineers, chemical engineers, geoscientists. These are highly educated people that need to get involved in these projects to develop them. So we want to have a conversation with the community about mentorship programs, training, science and technology education. And then if a project does go into development, what are the business opportunities for the local people? There's going to have to be services that are provided to a project even during exploration. What are some of the spin-off business opportunities for the local economy that can benefit from that. So it's a commitment to building better communities by investing in infrastructure and institutions at a local level. We can't do that without, again, a respectful conversation with elected leaders and a respectful conversation with interested members of the public. So we are looking for input from that diverse local community. One of the things that we will be doing at a board level, we will be developing a environment and sustainability committee. We are going to staff that committee, not with people inside the company. There will be some people there. I will be chairing that committee. But we're looking to pull in representatives of the local community around these projects. So we will be reaching out, looking for input and membership on what we call a community advisory committee that we can meet with as a company that is a broad representation of the communities that we're working in to address some of these social issues that we have to deal with as we explore and potentially develop a mineral deposit here in Wisconsin. Yes, so one of the individuals that we're going to have on this committee is a gentleman by the name of Al Christensen. He lives in Ladysmith, Wisconsin. Al is the former city administrator for the city of Ladysmith. We think he's a good candidate. He's interested in doing it. He's going to participate. And he also is the only local government official we know of here in Wisconsin who's actually experienced a mine being developed in his community. And that was done back in the 1990s. So he went through that whole process of a company coming in, exploring, putting a proposal together, having it permitted by the state, the controversy that goes with that, and what actually happened once the project went into production and what's happened after it's been closed. So we're committed to an open door policy. We'll leave our business cards here with you if you want to contact us after the presentation. And I'm sure this will be not the last time you see us in front of this committee. We look forward to talking to you in the future as we go forward. One thing I would like to touch base on with regards to the upcoming exploration program, as we were sitting listening to some of the comments coming from the public participants in the meeting, we understand there's a lot of concern about water quality and water quality protection. And one of the things that we're going to be doing as part of the exploration activities is we will be implementing a water quality testing program out at the site. So we will monitor water quality in the surrounding streams, upstream and downstream of where the drilling activity is going to be occurring. We'll be looking for indications of any impact from the drilling project, so we'll be testing for major cations, anions, trace metals, things like that. Highly confident that we're not going to have an impact on those water sources, but we understand the public's got questions. So we're going to do that testing. We're happy to share it with the committee when we get those test results. If anybody wants to come out to the site when the samples are being taken, you know, just contact us, coordinate with us. We're happy to have some folks come out. Also, we've heard in some of the press clippings and in some of the comments today, you know, concern about PFAS. And we certainly understand the public's concern about PFAS. That's why when we develop, when we do our drilling, just like you have to do for drilling a water well, you have to use water to run that drill rig and to core down into the rock. Any water that we use for drilling activities, we will be testing it before we use it to confirm that it's got no PFAS in that water. Any other drilling additives we use we use in the exploration program, like you have to create drilling mud, that's usually adding bentonite, which is a natural clay material, to the water. We are only going to be using DNR-approved drilling products in the exploration program. I'd like to talk a little bit about the history of mining. We all recognize, if you look back through history, certainly in the early days of industrialization in this country, there was a lot of mining that was done, and it did leave a scar on the environment. But nearly all mines, if not, and one of the things we hear is that mines become Superfund sites. I've heard that at a lot of meetings. One thing to recognize is that nearly all mines, if not all of them, that are on the EPA's environmental cleanup list were those sites that were developed before the 1970s, before modern day environmental regulations started to take hold, starting with federal government and then state government. At a national level, there's two primary federal agencies that are tasked with permitting what we call hard rock mines, which is where these metal products come from. And that's Bureau of Land Management and the U.S. Forest Service. I think it was about 7 years ago that one of the Senate committees, I think it was chaired by Lisa Murkowski, they were looking at environmental regulations as it relates to mining. And she sent a request, a letter to both those federal agencies, the Bureau of Land Management and U.S. Forest Service, asking for a listing of the number of sites that they've permitted since 1990 and how many of those sites have made its way to the national priorities list, which would be an indication that you had significant environmental harm at those sites. Since 1991, the Bureau of Land Management and the U.S. Forest Service responded to this Senate request. Since 1991, the Bureau of Land Management has permitted 659 hard rock mines. U.S. Forest Service, 2,685 mines have been permitted. Not one of those sites is on the national priorities list. What that demonstrates at a high level is that with a proper regulatory structure, the proper application of engineering and science to the development of these can develop these metals that we so that's good news. That's a success that shows good public policy, good enforcement of the regulations, and good application of engineering and science. We also have projects in this region that were not federally permitted that we can also point to that have very successful track records. What we're looking at in front of us is this is an aerial photo in the upper right-hand corner of this slide of the Eagle Mine, which is up in Marquette County, Michigan. It's about 20 miles from Lake Superior. And what you see here is the surface facilities that are used to support an underground mining operation. I'll show you some other details on this in a moment. And then the companion site down here is what's referred to as the Humboldt Mill, also up in Marquette County. It's 66 miles away from the Eagle Mine, but this is where they process the ore. So the ore is trucked from the mine site 66 miles to the mill. It's brought into this enclosed building where the ore is initially crushed. It is then conveyed into various crushers into the mill. It's all enclosed, okay? This is where the ore is crushed up into very fine powder and they separate the copper and nickel particles from the crushed up rock. So both of these were permitted in the mid-2000s. The Eagle Mine received its permit in about 2008, and the mill site received its permit in 2010. It was a variety of permits. It was a mining permit at each site, water discharge permits, air permits, and other various permits that were required to operate this site. So we do have a track record like these sites here that, again, received a lot of public attention. They were controversial at the time. They went into production, and they've got very, very clean environmental track records. We also have one right in our own backyard, which is the Flambeau Mine. And that's really a legacy of environmental protection. When that project was permitted, there was opposition to that project because they were mining, was an open pit mine. It was a VMS deposit, so it's a volcanogenic massive sulfide deposit. So it had sulfur mineralization in the ore, sulfur mineralization in the waste rock. That was operated within 140 feet of the Flambeau River. And there was a lot of claims that this project could not be permitted, could not be operated without harm to the Flambeau River. So what you see here is we're looking southwest, and in the background, you see the Flambeau River. So it's flowing from the right to the left, and this green arrow area right in the middle is where the open pit was. That's all been backfilled and reclaimed. The surface area here has been reclaimed as a wild prairie, basically. Reconstructed wetlands, and then we still have a couple buildings from the old mine site that were sitting back here that were left in place at the request of the city of Ladysmith. These were left in at the request of the city of Ladysmith so they could lease them out from the mining company and use them for continued economic activity for the local community. Want to point to a couple things here. First, focus on the river. Water quality in this river has been monitored upstream and downstream of the mine site since the late 1980s. So at that time, I was still in college, okay? And we've got reams of data on this site. Here we're looking at copper trends, we're looking at pH, and I can't remember what that next one is. I think it's sulfate. But there's no change in the water quality in the river over time. There's no detectable difference in water quality upstream or downstream of the mine site. So it's a very clean track record. This site, which you see a little schematic of it over here on the right, these are all the monitoring wells that are installed around the site. They've been monitoring groundwater quality out there since the 1980s. They're still monitoring groundwater quality out there. They're still monitoring surface water quality out there, and they will be for another 20 years. So it's a very, very good database, a very good project to study on how to responsibly develop one of these projects. This project has gone through a number of different court cases from the time it was permitted to the time it was closed to about 10 years ago when there was a lawsuit brought in federal court alleging that the project impaired water quality in the Flambeau River. The allegation was that runoff from this industrial outlot area that was left in place for the city had contaminated this stream, this intermittent stream, it's called Stream C, that flows down into the Flambeau River, and that had impaired water quality and uses in the river. This was a weeks-long trial in federal court down in Madison. I was actually one of the witnesses in that case. At the end of the day, the judge ruled that the project did not impair water quality in the Flambeau River. And as a result of that, there was no financial award to the plaintiffs, which is what they were seeking as a financial damages award against plaintiffs. She did not award that. She in fact said that the project deserves commendation, not penalties. And this was after an extensive review of the environmental data on this project from the point of project development all the way through closure. So we've got federal cases that actually support that these projects can be done safely. Oops, just a couple things here. So yeah, so here's where the open pit was, and you know there's where the river is, etc. So another example is the Eagle Mine. This was another project that was permitted up in Marquette County, Michigan. Again, it was controversial at the time. What we see here is an aerial photo of the mine site. This is an underground mine. It sits right over here. Sits underneath a river, sits underneath the Salmon Trout River, which flows into Lake Superior. The mine is accessed via an underground decline that starts here and goes down and over to the underground mine workings where the ore is extracted from the rock and then hauled to surface where it is loaded into trucks and then hauled down to that mill site that I referred to previously. A couple of the other features at the site here is this rectangular gray area that you see right here is their waste rock storage facility. This waste rock has sulfur in it. So when that rock is brought to the surface and it's exposed to the atmosphere, it oxidizes. It's kind of like your red wagon rusting in your backyard. And when that rusts, it creates a little bit of acidity that can start leaching metals. That's why you don't want to just leave this rock sitting on the ground, okay? So this waste rock is stored in an engineered line facility with a liner system very similar to what you would use at the county landfill here in Marathon County. Goes through the same types of engineering, construction QA, and all that kind of stuff for its installation before it's actually put into use. All of the water that comes from this mine is pumped into lined retention basins, again with liners, just like you would use at a wastewater treatment plant. And then it's pumped into a wastewater treatment plant here where it's actually going through a metals precipitation process and then a reverse osmosis process. So what you have here at the end of the day is permeate from a reverse osmosis system, and part of that water also goes through an evaporator system. So it's almost like distilled water that's being generated by this treatment plant. Once it's treated, it is then infiltrated back into the aquifer where it came from. So this was a very successful project. It's still in operation today. You could have a tour of it if you were so inclined to go up there and do a tour. So we have some track records, and I think it's important to recognize you know, what the facts are on these projects. Both the Flambeau and the Eagle Mine project went through extensive litigation. On the Eagle project, there were a number of allegations that were made during litigation, which took place, the court proceeding on this project took place over about 4 months. Probably 50 different expert witnesses, engineers, scientists, et cetera, getting up, debating in front of a judge. What were the claims that were made by the folks that did not want this project to go forward? One was that the crown pillar or the roof of the mine, that area between the mine and the Salmon Trout River, that it was going to collapse. Mining company, their experts said, nope, that area is not going to collapse. Well, we're now 10 years into the operation. It's been perfectly stable. There's been no subsidence at the land surface. Another concern was that the groundwater inflow to the mine would exceed the capacity of the wastewater treatment system. There'd be so much water coming into the mine via faults and fractures that it would overwhelm the capacity of the water treatment system. That groundwater inflow was estimated by the mining company to be about 250 gallons per minute. Groundwater inflow, now that it's in operation, is way under 250 gallons a minute. It's under 100 gallons a minute. So there were claims that the water treatment plant would not work. This reverse osmosis technology would not work. It's been operating for 10 years and it's worked fine, and they monitor it every single day. And they're monitoring groundwater quality around that infiltration system. There were claims made that the liners for the waste rock storage area would not work. They would leak and they would contaminate groundwater. It's not happened. There were claims made that acid rock drainage from the mine will destroy the Salmon Trout River, which flows right over the top of the underground mine. That has not happened. They're monitoring water quality in that river upstream and downstream and all over the place. There were claims made that the air emissions from the mining operation would settle out on the Yellow Dog Plains, and it would lead to acidification of the plant life and acidic runoff into the streams. That has not happened. And then finally, there were claims that the coaster brook trout, which reside at the mouth of the Salmon Trout River where it flows into Lake Superior, that those would be harmed as a result of the mining operation. That has not happened. So we have both at the federal level and at the state level evidence from projects that did go through a very rigorous permitting process here in Wisconsin, here in Michigan, that these projects can be done well. It takes engagement with the community. It takes discussion, it takes respectful discussion, and that's what we're looking to initiate with you here today. So closing message is Wisconsin in the region really led the way with Flambeau project. Produced metals compliant with U.S. and Wisconsin environmental health and safety standards. Michigan in 2005 passed a non-metallic mining law that was patterned in many respects after Wisconsin's. They have since then permitted 2 operations that are in, or 1 operation, the Eagle Mine and the mill, that are in operation, and they've got 2 other projects that are in advanced stages of development in the UP. We think that it's time that we, together with folks like you and other interested members of the public, build on Wisconsin's success, which is really a public policy success, to achieve a more sustainable future by developing these mineral resources that we need for many of the issues that we have to tackle in our economy. And that's regardless of what side of the political aisle that you sit on. So with that, thank you, and we'll take any questions you might have.
Sure. So if there are any questions from members of the Environmental Resources Committee or the Metallic Mining Committee, now would be the time. So first I've got Russ Wilson, and then we'll have Supervisor Ritter afterwards. Go ahead, Russ.
Quick question. There was mention of rare earth metals, lithium, nickel.
And we're going to have to pause for microphones. Hopefully that one's on.
Oh,
There you go. Thank you.
Yeah, so there was mention of rare earth metals, lithium, zinc, nickel, and expanding the resource. So with the application that is contemplated here, is there any thought of expanding the resource or looking for anything beyond copper and gold?
At Reef, unlikely. Right. Reef is primarily a gold deposit with copper associated in its periphery. I don't think that you'll find the geology of the Pinocchion Volcanic Belt, which we're focused on, the Pinocchion Volcanic Belt. You will, I'd be shocked if, based on the geology of the Greenstone Belt, that you'll find any lithium on the Pinocchion Volcanic Belt. That includes in Reef. That you'll find, what else was there?
Nickel, zinc.
Nickel has not yet been found on the Pinocchion Volcanic Belt. Nickel's not typically associated with what they call VMS deposits, volcanogenic massive sulfide deposits, which the Pinocchion is. So while you might find nickel in northern Wisconsin associated with some of the igneous intrusives that are not unlike the intrusives you see in northern Minnesota, like on the Duluth complex, I wouldn't expect that you'll find nickel in the Pinocchion Volcanic Belt, and we are only exploring the Pinocchion Volcanic Belt at this time. Lithium is primarily found out west in this country right now.
Okay, Supervisor Ritter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that you guys are going to be doing extensive water testing if you do this. My question would be, if you do get a test that shows contaminants, what's your next plan of action and who pays for it?
Yeah, so we're going to be using probably a private well close to the project site. We're going to research what well that we use so that it doesn't have any history of land use in the area that would indicate that there would be PFAS in the well. But if we do test it, we're obviously going to share it with whoever is the owner of that well. I think it's unlikely with the wells that we're targeting that we're going to find it. But what we want to do is make sure that what we do use doesn't have PFAS in it. So, and then anything that we use we'll share with the local landowner, obviously.
But what would be the next steps to clean it up if something is found, and who pays for that?
Would be the owner of the well. That it would be their responsibility.
You're talking about if in terms of background, right?
I'm talking,
Well, this is what would likely occur, and we still need to design the program, but the first thing we would do is go out and do baseline, so we'd sample that well before we had done anything on the property. Let's say we sample that well, and we've not yet entered the property and done anything, and it comes back contaminated. I think, Steve, that's what you were referring to.
yeah, no, I'm saying if you start out with a clean well,
Yep.
and during your process, you find out that you are inadvertently putting contaminants in, then what's your process for cleaning up what your process is putting into the water?
Yeah, yeah.
It's to make sure that whatever we're using going in doesn't have PFAS in it. That's why we're going to do the testing.
Supervisor Robinson.
Individuals would get on the Citizens Advisory Board and how you envision that working for the purpose of transparency?
The advisory board. Yeah, so we're in the early stages of putting that together. We will be reaching out to various organizations to solicit their interest. And again, we'll be looking to get a broad swath of representation from people across, not only in this area, but other areas where we may eventually be doing exploration work.
Other questions? Supervisor Christian, former Supervisor Christensen, Town Board Member.
Thank you, Mr.
Christensen.
Chair. You're going to be more drilling. I remember back in the 80s, I did a lot of work out there with the drillers. What more are you going to find out there? I mean, you've done a lot of drilling, or not you, but Noranda and these other outfits. And you said you're going to find more, the different geology to make up at the rock, I guess. But what more can you find?
Well, one thing that you'll find with exploration geologists is it's a puzzle to them. It's fun for them to try to figure out what the genesis of the ore is, right? What was developing the geologic model for genesis for an ore deposit. And each one is different. And at this point in time, our exploration geologists, all of whom have drilled this project before, let me think through it, Ted DeMatteis, John, Jeff, all of them have drilled reef before. They have taken a second look, right? Because it's been a good 30 years since someone's drilled out there. No, I shouldn't say that. Pardon me. 2011, 2012, 10 years. They've looked at the geology and the geophysics and have concluded that Noranda and Aquila really were not focusing on what was the structure doing out there, right? They were focused more on where are we going to find the gold just generally in the geology, in the host rock, rather than saying, and again, I've come to this, I've been here a year, I've been a CEO for a year, this is in discussions with this group. They feel that those two companies did not spend the time necessary to really be evaluating the structure out there, all right? Because the structure, believe it or not, can be at a different cant, dip, and strike than your geology, okay? The general foliation of your igneous or metamorphic geology out there. And so what we really are focused on is, that structure. And that was not looked at in the past. So there is a chance that we will go out and drill and not really be able to get a handle on the structure, right? It's not a guaranteed to find that out because we have significant amounts of overburden. So we're not able to just walk on that hard rock and see structure to begin with. It's all under about 50 to 100 feet of overburden. Did that make sense? Yeah.
Other questions from the committee? Okay.
Chair Langenhead,
We heard you.
this is Supervisor Mask.
So Supervisor Mask, while you aren't on either of the committees, you are a member of the county board. I will recognize you, so feel free to go ahead.
Thank you very much. I have a question to follow up on Supervisor Ritter's question. So he asked if there's a clean well that is tested, there's no PFAS in it. If you continue on with mining, are you going to process, it's a two-part question. Are you going to process on site? And if you are processing on site, the chemicals that you use to process the minerals that you're taking out of this so-called mine, when they start polluting the groundwater and you're testing this well or wells, are you going to stop mining if it shows positive? And then how do you stop the pollution? That's my question. Thank you.
First off, that is a theoretical, and as Stephen showed here, we have two mines that have operated, one in Wisconsin, one in Michigan, that are not showing any releases of any contaminants. So you've proposed a theoretical where these liners apparently have been breached, and we have the release of metals or sulfuric acid as a result of acid mine drainage. That's as I understand it, such that, let's say you have these failures, which we've not seen in these two mines, Steve. I think the question is, what are we going to do if you find that there is failure, right?
Yes, that would be my question. Thank you.
Yeah, so a couple things. One, we don't know what kind of processing would occur at this site yet because we're still in very early exploration stages. I think your question really gets to the point of what does the department, the DNR, look at when they're reviewing a mining permit application, okay? Because that's where these issues and these concerns that you raised are really regulated. And the regulatory process in Wisconsin, one, is very rigorous, okay? Just like there's probably folks here that are familiar with the county landfill that has a solid waste permit. You had to go through a feasibility study, extensive hydrogeologic studies, engineering studies, engineering designs that are reviewed by the department. They look at it very rigorously before they give you a license for that landfill. Part of that landfill license is a permit that requires you to monitor and do all this kind of stuff. The process to get that permit for a mining project is much more rigorous than it is for a landfill. There are a couple key things that the department's going to look at. One, they're going to require a very extensive hydrogeologic investigation at the site in a broad area around the site. That's to map groundwater flow, groundwater quality, baseline groundwater quality, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a couple very specific provisions in state law that have to be addressed as part of the mining permit, as part of the environmental impact report that the applicant has to submit to the state for review, and part of the state's review and issuance of an EIS. Notably, if one of these projects was to have a release, say from a tailings facility that's got tailings water in it that came from the mill site, how is that tailings facility regulated? Well, it goes through a very rigorous engineering review process with the department. And I can attest to that because I've been involved in projects in Wisconsin, and I can attest to the rigor that their engineers actually look at this stuff, okay? First of all, part of the engineering design for, say, a tailings facility is going to require a liner system very similar to what you would use at a landfill, okay? So that water is pumped out of the tailings facility and it goes through a treatment plant or it's reused in the mill. Now, let's assume that there's a leak or something like that. There's all sorts of monitoring wells around that tailings facility, just like you have at your landfill, okay? And there's a contingency plan for what has to happen if there was to be a leak. However, unlike your landfill, before you can actually get that mining permit, a mining company has to demonstrate through extensive analysis of the mining waste, the liner system, percolation rates, if any, through that liner system, and other types of modeling activities, that there's a high degree of certainty that that facility is going to comply with groundwater quality standards. It's a standard an engineering standard that has to be met for a mining project that is like no other in the state of Wisconsin. So it's very rigorous in terms of what we would have to provide to the department to secure that permit. And it's backed up by contingency plans, and it's backed up by monitoring. And we have projects where these facilities have gone into operation, and we know that they work. We know that these liner systems, these design processes work. So, but I think the question that was posed really gets to something that we would be tackling 7 years down the road at the time of permitting.
Did you talk about double line leachate collection?
Yeah, some of these facilities have leak detection layers underneath the primary liner system, like the waste rock storage area up at the Eagle Mine. And what they see with that leak detection layer underneath the primary membrane, they're not getting any leakage out of that primary membrane. So we know with proper engineering, very rigorous construction quality assurance when these liner systems are installed, that these facilities can be designed and constructed to protect the environment.
Thank you very much. I've been on the solid waste board for 10 years, so I understand what you're talking about. I still have issues with our groundwater because it's such a pristine area. And I will hold you to your promise that you keep us safe here if you go ahead with this. Thank you. And thank you, Chair Langenhan. I appreciate you letting me speak.
You're welcome.
I have one question for you. Marilyn Bender, the town's representative. Do you have to put up any type of a bond or anything like that so that if something does happen down, that there is money that will take care of whatever damage might happen?
Yeah, so let me talk.
Just 2 points
hang
there.
on.
Just 2 points there. One is if you're operating and you decide just to close. The other is people are very concerned about is if a company goes into bankruptcy and can't continue to operate. And Steve will talk about the types of what they call financial assurances that they require you to put in place. You look at, for example, the Polymet mine that's being permitted. At one point, they have almost $1 billion they need to have bonded. $1 billion available in order to close the project, given the stage that they're at in that project. So there is always money available in one or more forms that satisfies the regulators and the banking system to have the money available such that if that company fails for one reason or another, there's money to come in and close.
Yeah, so the way Wisconsin's financial assurance works, and this was actually beefed up with the 2018 mine reform bill that was passed and signed into law. For the Flambeau project, which was permitted in the early 1990s, there was a reclamation bond and a long-term care and maintenance bond that had to be posted. The reclamation bond covered what would it cost the state if the company went away and the site had to be reclaimed per the closure plan that was included in the permit application. So they had to post financial assurance for that closure and reclamation process. They also had to post financial assurance for long-term monitoring and maintenance. So that's to do all the environmental monitoring, all the groundwater, surface water monitoring. They were monitoring vegetation recovery at the site for many years and other types of monitoring. That also had to be included in the financial assurance package. As of 2018 or 2017, when the mining reform bill was passed, there's now 2 additional layers of financial assurance that have been added to these projects. One is, in essence, a contingency fund. So what would happen if a mine went into operation and there was some legacy contamination at the site? Who would pay for that? So there's a financial assurance mechanism that is in place to address legacy contamination that could occur from one of these operations. And that stays in place for a period, I think, of about 50 years after closure of the mine. So there you have 3 pools of money available to the state. Then there is a 4th layer of financial assurance, which I think that a good analogy is a landfill. A tailings facility would have an engineered cap over it, okay? What's required under the mining law now is to post financial assurance that designates the state as the beneficiary of that bonding mechanism, where there would be funds available, say, 250 years into the future to replace that cap if it degraded, okay? So unlike a landfill, which has that same type of cap and does not have that financial assurance requirement, a tailings facility in the state of Wisconsin would. So there's 4 levels of financial assurance that are now in place for these projects.
Okay, I've got Supervisor Overbeck and then Supervisor Shafinsky.
I guess I have one question, and it deals with, we talk about longevity. You know, it's 50 years, 100 years, 200 years. Our water sources are so important to life. And my question is, financial assistance is fine, but the reality is if that water source goes bad, there's no amount of money that can pay for that water source. And what are there any plans to address through continued engineering services that cap stays in place, the liner stays in place, and the water is protected? Because that's of the importance, not just what happens and who pays for it. It's, is there a plan for the future to address this?
I say one thing, and that is, Steve will handle the question for the most part, but in the projects I've been involved in, if you're talking about during operations, there's very little fluid that's being used in the mining process other than water that is being pulled from the mine. If you're talking long-term over tailing storage, you know, the engineers have a high degree of control over the type of tailings that get disposed. So they can take a lot of the sulfur out. They can take a lot of the metals out so that this material becomes generally inert, right? And not prone to oxidation, creating the acid, which itself then, with a decrease in pH, increases the metal content of the water. You can engineer that all the way such that the stuff you're putting in the landfill is generally inert. And I'll let Steve just talk about how you close Flambeau and what the plan is for Eagle.
Yeah, so it's an area that, say like the tailings facility, et cetera, that you were talking about. There's a lot of engineering innovation going on there. Dan mentioned, you know, desulfurizing the tails, okay, removing the sulfur. There's other things like filtered tails, which are actually compressed into that line facility. That cuts down on the oxygen penetration into the tails and eliminates the generation of acidity due to the oxidation of any small amount of sulfur that may remain in those tails. There's a number of other things that are being looked at in the industry, so there's always this innovation that's taken place on these facilities. In addition to that, I think your question really gets to the point of regulatory protection. How is the public protected by these rules? And ultimately, what type of discretion does the department have? I mentioned that long-term care bond and other things like that, they terminate at the discretion of the department. The department can require those to be in place longer than that. They can require additional financial assurance. It's all going to be based on the unique characteristics of any project and the unique environmental conditions around that project and what's needed for long-term protection of the public's interest. So there are mechanisms in the approval process for the department to also address some of those concerns.
I'm going to make one very quick comment before we move on to Supervisor Shafinsky's question. Again, we're talking about the exploratory drilling. We're not talking about any sort of potential mining that may or may not happen in the future. So please, committee members, focus on that with your questions and discussion. Supervisor Shafinsky.
This one is working. Very good. Thank you for addressing the tailings question. That actually was going to be one that I was going to bring up. My question and it's a little bit to what Supervisor Langenhan just addressed, but I'm going to ask it anyway, and that is the liner system. What is the design life expectancy of that system? What's the standard? 100 years, 500 years, 1,000 years?
The thing that affects liners, so these are like HDPE, high-density polyethylene liners underlain by, say, a GCL or a recompacted 3-foot clay layer. That membrane liner, there are studies that indicate that they exist, they're stable, and have longevity of hundreds and hundreds of years. The thing that causes their decay most significantly is photooxidation and things like that, so exposure to sunlight and things of that nature. So when you're talking about a liner that's underneath earthen materials, the key thing there really for its longevity is good construction quality assurance. So that's testing, you know, you got the panels, they go down, it's testing the seams on those panels. Once the whole thing is installed, there's a number of additional leak detection surveys that can be done looking for pinhole leaks or construction defects and things of that nature before the facility is actually put into operation. So that becomes really key. And then with regards to the cap, it's kind of the same thing, except that's going to be buried underneath earthen materials as well. So if that's not exposed to the atmosphere and you have good CQA, there's no reason to think that it's not going to last for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah, the regs, as it relates to all these liners in the mining industry, have basically been developed and patterned off the Federal Resource Conservation Recovery Act, which is the federal act and set of federal regulations that manage and regulate hazardous waste disposal in the country. And so you'll find that these liners that are used in the mining industry are built to the same standards that are used in the high-level nuclear waste industry as well as the mixed hazardous nuclear waste.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? I guess I'll ask. Go ahead, Mr. Small.
There we go. Okay. Is it working? Got a green light. I'll take this. So to bring it back around to exploration drilling and of all things, PFAS, you said you'd use drilling fluids that are approved by the DNR. I'm assuming that list was made before PFAS became all the rage. And do you know, is the DNR planning on, or have they already, do they test these specifically for PFAS? I would think the risk is pretty high for water well drillers and utility installers to use fluids like that might have PFAS or might not.
I think the DNR is in.
Is that a question for DNR?
Perfect. Yes, that's a question for DNR.
I thought I'd kind of remind
Roberta,
folks that we're still out here. Yes. Agreed. DNR has an approved list of drilling fluids based on toxicity information and other components of each of the drilling fluids. We have taken a look at the drilling fluids on our list and are currently evaluating them for PFAS content. Our groundwater experts have been reaching out and speaking with the drilling fluid manufacturers, and so far we have not found any that contain PFAS in them. There is one drilling fluid that we know of that does have PFAS in it. It is not generated in the United States. It is from abroad, and it is currently not on DNR's approved list. So hopefully that answers your question, but the use of the drilling fluids that we know of on our approved list currently do not have PFAS in them.
Okay, thank you, Roberta. Supervisor Overbeck?
Just to follow up on for a DNR question, could you explain your supervision of the drilling process and oversight of that process while it's going on?
I can walk through a little bit of our regulatory purviews. It will take quite a bit of information that we will have to receive about the drilling process prior to approval. And so we will be looking at site preparation, the access to the site and what they will need to do in order to bring their equipment in, set it up. We would be looking at the individual boreholes that would be placed, their depth, orientation, location, how it is managed, the amount of fluids that they would be using in the drilling process, plus any water used. We would be looking at the discharge of the water that would come from the drilling hole, the management of the drill hole cores that come from that process, how they would manage any waste products that would be generated from the drilling process, as well as the final site stabilization that they would be doing, along with revegetating anything that needs to be stabilized after drilling is done. We would also be putting limitations on how long a borehole can remain unabandoned, either temporarily or permanently. And so all of these things would require DNR oversight. We would have regular on-site inspections at the startup for the site clearing, during the drilling process, as well as monitoring for their management practices and compliance with the permit that they would have associated with the drilling project. So there would be start to finish oversight by the department throughout the project.
Supervisor Overbeck, third and final time. I'd also encourage you to please direct your questions to Greenlight as
I just have a question. I was sitting in a North Central Regional Planning Commission, and a presentation was given on carbon, as far as carbon credits. Are there any plans for going one step further and reclaiming as far as vegetation? Or they talked about prairie, but it's mostly deforestation of Wisconsin in the area of the mine. And there's a great emphasis on putting more trees back. Is that possible on these mining sites?
This is a question as it relates to exploration, right? Deforestation. Well, there'll be no deforestation this coming winter. I mean, we will only clear shrubs. That's it. I mean, no trees will be taken out.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing, hearing none. Dan and Steve, thank you for coming today. Greatly appreciate it. And all the other assistance we have from the Department of Natural Resources, we certainly appreciate as well as the education presentation from our staff. Director Miskimins, did you have anything to add?
I think I just wanted to, Roberta from DNR did add into that she concurred with the statements that Steve made regarding the bonding. So just sharing that with the committee as well. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
Jacob, very much. And I want to thank the board for your patience. We got 2 hours more time than we thought we were going to get. So we appreciate it. And as Steve indicated, please, we'll leave our cards, reach out, call any one of us, anytime. We'd be happy to take your calls.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Moving on to item 5, adjournment of the Metallic Mining Committee. Motion by Supervisor Robinson, second by Supervisor Wilson. Any further discussion from the Metallic Mining Committee? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor on the Metallic Mining Committee of adjourning signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you to the members of the Metallic Mining Committee. ERC members, we still have the work portion of our meeting to get through. Let's take a 5-minute break. You can all get refreshed. Thank you.